Okay, step one of any language analysis is to read the article about 3 times. The first time I would read an article, I would just read it straight through, just to get an understanding of the premise of the article and sort of its purpose. The second time, I would then start annotating. And then I would look to do it a third time just to get some more evidence from the text, highlighting the tone, sort of finding some more pertinent quotes. So we're going to work from the premise that we've already read it through once, and this is the second reading, and I want to show you the annotations that I've made. So first of all, context is important, okay? And so when we read anything, we need to understand who is writing, to whom they are writing, where is it written, so where it has been published, what's the form, okay? Is it a letter? Is it a news report? And finally, what is the purpose? Why are they writing? Now, at the very top of this article, we can actually see a lot of that information here. Okay, we can see that it's written from John Franklin Stevens, who is a Special Olympics athlete. It's written to Ann Coulter after she referred to the president during a presidential debate as a retard on her social media account. And we can see it was published on the Special Olympics Virginia website, October 2012. Okay, so what we know of John Franklin is that he is both an athlete and an ambassador of the Special Olympics. And we can see already that the purpose is to openly challenge her use of language, as well as broader society's perception of those who have an intellectual disability, and further the language we use. Now, Ms. Mathias, how did you infer all that from the very beginning? Well, the fact that it's actually an open letter. Okay, open letter tells us that this writer is wanting other people to read it. We know there's been some contentious use of language that would be highly offensive and inappropriate. We can also see his image here. And so after having one read through, I know that the writer has Down syndrome. And so after reading it through once, I can confidently say that this open letter is written to challenge her use of language, but not just her use. It's also broader society's perception, because actually there are many readers that may not be addressed but will come across this article who may also need an education on their use of language and how they perhaps stereotype and marginalize anyone with a disability. Now, the next thing I'd like to do is just draw attention to the image. And again, I've already read the article, so I do have a fairly good idea about what it's about. I know that the image is actually a photo of the author himself, and that is John Franklin Stevens. And I can see here that he's actually in an auditorium, like a stadium, and I would actually guess that that's during the Special Olympics. Okay, the image here shows him as a confident young man. He's well dressed. He actually holds a certain sense of power and status in that sporting space. So this debunks generalizations that we might hold of a person with a disability as if they cannot succeed, because we can also see here that this young man has Down syndrome. So the image is actually reinforcing what the article is saying about people with any disability, and it actually challenges ableism. Now, class, you may or may not have heard of that term. I want to just draw your attention to that, because ableism is any stance that we may have that actually pits power of a person with a person with ability over a person without an ability. For example, in racism, it's holding one race over another. Okay, sexism, it's sort of challenge, so it's actually stating that one sex has more importance value over another. Same with ableism. And the way that we enact ableism is, it could be subtle ways. So it could be the fact that there isn't enough infrastructure to allow a person to access a space. So a person with a wheelchair may not be able to enter, let's say, a building because there's no ramp. That would be a form of ableism, which is discriminating their ability to actually access the space. The same with accessing information for a person with visual impairment. If there's signs, but there's no option of any braille, that's also societal ableism, where we are actually making it more difficult for someone with a disability to access that information. And the same with language. So this article is actually challenging our use of language and how we perhaps stigmatize people with any disability by our language. Okay, so let's make our way through the article quickly. You can see I've already made other comments, so I just want to talk you through it. So, dear Ann Coulter, come on, Ms. Coulter, you aren't dumb and you aren't shallow. So why are you continually using a word like the R word as an insult? Okay, so right here, it's a rhetorical question. But at the very introduction, he's actually asserting that Miss Coulter is not dumb and shallow. So what he's saying is, if you're not dumb and shallow, in his rhetorical question, he's actually challenging her character. Then why would you do it? Is there some deficit in your own character? Now later on, you can see he says that I'm a 30-year-old man with Down syndrome who has struggled with the public's perception that an intellectual disability means that I am dumb and shallow. So right now he's actually drawing attention to his own experience, but actually he's repeating the terms dumb and shallow, which are derisive terms, but he's turning those terms onto himself. So earlier he says to the reader, you're not dumb and shallow. But then he actually says, I have been perceived as dumb and shallow myself. So he shared his own lived experience of being misunderstood. Then he says, I am not either of those things, but I do process information more slowly than the rest of you. In fact, it has taken me all day to figure out how to respond to your use of the R word last night. And I find it really great that he's not actually using the word retard. It's a little bit like some highly offensive words that have been used in racial slurs. For example, NIGGER, which has been used in the most horrendous ways for the black community in the US. And so in that term, they might say the N word, okay? And he's done a similar thing here. He's actually highlighting just how offensive that word is, and even his use of R word is actually reinforcing that. So right now, what's actually doing, he's acknowledging his disability. And what he's doing, and this is really interesting, class, is that he's saying, I'm not dumb and shallow, but I do process information more slowly than the rest of you. He's not just talking about Anne, he's talking about to Anne and most of the readers, okay? So what he's saying is to the reader and the greater audience that they're in a position of power in terms of ability in relation to him as the author. So he's positioning us to say, you actually come from a privileged position where you don't actually need to, things are processed quicker for you. It takes me a lot longer, which is a really interesting thing to do. It's a humble stance, and he's positioning us to understand his experience. And then he says here the following, okay, what he thought. And I find this really interesting, and I'm going to actually cover these next four paragraphs together because it all has the same drift. I thought first of asking whether you meant to describe the president as someone who was bullied as a child by people like you, but rose above it to find a way to succeed in life, as many of my fellow Special Olympians have. Then I wondered if you meant to describe him as someone who has to struggle to be thoughtful about everything he says, as everyone else races from one snarky soundbite to the next. Finally, I wondered if you meant to degrade him as someone who is likely to receive bad health care, live in low-grade housing with very little income, and still manages to see life as a wonderful gift. Because, Miss Coulter, that is who we are, and much, much more. And right here, Year 10, the author is candidly describing reality of people who live with a disability. And what he's doing, he's recognizing that those on the receiving end of the R word, actually, they've battled through systemic. So it's stuff that perhaps we don't even see, but like I talked about, maybe no ramps for people with wheelchairs, perhaps the language we use, things are just systemically unjust, and also societal injustices, the way that we see and talk about people, such as bullying and poor health care. Okay, so he's talked about that reality, and then he says, but after I saw your tweet, I realized you just wanted to belittle the president by linking him to people like me. You assumed that people would understand and accept that being linked to someone like me is an insult, and you assumed you would get away with it and still appear on TV. So the author is actually calling out the truth of the reader's intent. It's actually to insult the president because she considers it offensive to be associated with anyone with an intellectual disability. But further, she actually knows that she'll get away with it because it's not just her that thinks that way. A lot of the readers accept the word retard as being a derogative term that no one wants to be connected with. So what she's actually done is use that word, and he says, I have to wonder if you considered other hateful words but recoiled from the backlash. So what he's saying is, I knew that you wanted to use something harsh, but maybe you knew you couldn't get away with some other words. So he's further acknowledging that she was weaponizing the term retard, okay, as something that's scornful, hateful. And perhaps she knew that other terms that she might have used may not have been so readily accepted, okay? It's almost a little bit like how we might sometimes still hear the word gay used in a derogative term when people say, oh, he's acting so gay, or don't be so gay. Most people today know that that's actually not an appropriate term to use if you're not talking about someone's sexuality, or identity in that way. Similarly, what he's saying is there are other words you could have used, but you probably wouldn't got away with it. But this one you did, because there's still a widespread acceptance of that. But well, Ms. Coulter, you and society, here we go again, he's writing to all of us. You need to learn that being compared to people like me should be considered a badge of honor. So actually what he's saying is, what's been deemed as disability is something he's actually proud to experience, because he's achieved a lot in spite of this. No one overcomes more than we do and still loves life so much. So he's totally challenging the idea that there should be shame attached to disability. He's been able to overcome and live through challenges like anyone with any sort of disability, his peers and alike. And he says that actually this is something to be proud of, that they're champions to live through challenges and maintain joy and love for life. And finally, I love the closing, and I actually would suggest here that whilst there remains an urge to the reader to think differently, there is actually a gentler tone in the concluding of this article. It's demonstrated as he invites Anne to join him and his peers at the Special Olympics. He says, come join us someday at the Special Olympics, see if you can walk away with your heart unchanged. And then signing off, which I thought was really beautiful, a friend you haven't met yet, John Franklin Stevens, Global Messenger of the Special Olympics, Virginia. And this concluding sign-off, a friend you haven't made yet, it's an invitation for a relationship built on respect and understanding. So he's actually becoming the bigger person, and actually he's showing that he is the bigger person here by stretching out an olive leaf, if you like, a peace offering to say, come and understand us. I can speak the truth in love, but I'm not going to hold this against you to explore a friendship. So that is the annotating phase, and from there what we're going to be doing is looking to bring this all together in order to write a response. So what we're going to do after this now is we're going to talk about how to get all this information and maybe grabbing some more information. I haven't said a lot about the tone, so you might want to go through this now and add some more information. So take about 10 minutes, write down the information I've already shared here on your article. You might want to go back and rewind and pause and listen to parts I've said again. Get that information down, but add some more information, thinking about the tone, thinking about other nuances I might have missed. And our next video, we're going to talk about how to actually get this in a structured response of an introduction and 3 body paragraphs with a conclusion. All right, see you soon.